Today, the Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, repeated his warning that misinformation is a key threat to fighting COVID. And the Biden administration is calling on Facebook to do better. On Friday, President Biden said that COVID misinformation on social media platforms is, in his words, killing people, in response to a question from NBC's Peter Alexander. Yesterday, the company shot back that it's not Facebook's fault that he missed his July 4th goal to get 70% of adults vaccinated. Facebook defended itself using data collected with help from Carnegie Mellon University and the University of Maryland. The data shows that 85% of Facebook users in the U.S. say they have been or want to be vaccinated against COVID-19. The company added that it's removed more than 18 million pieces of COVID misinformation since the beginning of the pandemic. Joining us now are Shira Frenkel and Cecilia Kong, tech reporters for the New York Times. Their new book is called An Ugly Truth: Inside Facebook's Battle for Domination. Good to see you both. And Cecilia Kong, let me start with you. What is this ugly truth that the title of the book refers to?
Well, the ugly truth simply is that the company prioritizes growth and it prioritizes engagement on the site. And that has come at a cost. The collateral damage has been, more recently, the spread of misinformation and things that really spill over into real life and cause real harm. And that's the dichotomy that Facebook has to reckon with. It's great success from its users, as well as potential harms that it causes with its users.
Shira, with regards to the back and forth between the administration and Facebook over COVID, there's a biologist named Carl Bergstrom who says that Facebook's using some sleight of hand with his numbers. In one of his tweets, he noted that Facebook gets that 85% by counting those who have or intend to be vaccinated or say they have, as opposed to the president's plan, which has to do with the people who've actually been vaccinated. That's that 70% goal. What do you make of this back and forth between the administration and Facebook? How do you see it?
You know, that figure you gave of tens of millions of posts that were taken down is very much based on.
I think we're having a little audio trouble with you, Shira. Stand by. I'm going to come back to you in just 1 second. Let me keep going with Cecilia, and then Shira, I promise I'll come back to you in just a minute. What is your sense of where this goes from here? It's one thing for, the president and for Facebook to fire back, but we're still in the middle of a pandemic, and we need everybody helping spread good information that we can get. What do you make of this back and forth?
So right now, the Biden administration is racing to meet its vaccine goals, and it's going to be hard. And they identify misinformation on the internet, on these platforms, as a major problem. Facebook presents data that actually shows one side of the story, which is that they are presenting authentic information that promotes the vaccine. What they're not presenting, and what's really frustrating the White House in my conversations with them, is that they're not presenting how many people actually view, like, and share misinformation. And that's the thing that the White House really wants for Facebook to focus on. So yes, Facebook gets some credit for actually promoting authentic content about the vaccine, but they aren't presenting, really solving this misinformation problem. And Joshua, this is the latest flashpoint of years of problems with misinformation and harmful content on Facebook that we show in our book that has been something that the company has struggled with from the human side and the technology side, and it's incredibly consequential.
I think we've got Shira's audio tight now. Shira, let me come back to you with regards to how the company deals with misinformation. One of the anecdotes in the book has to do with video of President Trump, that moment where he talked about using like disinfectants and sunlight inside the body to try to kill COVID. You wrote that one senior executive inside the company said that they were stuck in an untenable position, meant defending a decision to let the president spread absolute nonsense medical information in the middle of a pandemic. I have to give Facebook a little bit of leeway because they are in completely uncharted technological waters with having a social media platform that encompasses the entire globe. It's basically would be the population of one of the world's largest countries if it was a country. What is your sense of how well Facebook is learning to manage misinformation?
Absolutely, Joshua. I mean, as you said, Facebook is in uncharted waters, but one of the things we show is that Facebook made the decision to jump into these waters themselves. And along the way, people raised the flag. They tried to warn Facebook. They said, hey, we're seeing problems with misinformation. We're seeing issues around people, especially leaders, government leaders, spreading misinformation. We should come up with a policy about this. And again throughout this book, we show that Facebook really waits until after the problem has already started to try and come up with a policy. It's very reactive rather than proactive.
Now that we got your audio, let me stick with you, Shira, and get another question to you, particularly because I want to know about where the solution lies. Jen Psaki, the White House press secretary, said during a briefing this week that 12 accounts on Facebook are responsible for about 2/3 of the vaccine misinformation on the platform. And if you're wondering who they are, we got a list. They come from a report called the Disinformation Dozen. We'll show you who the 12 are. I wonder, so if you got any of these 12 in your Facebook accounts of the people you're following, maybe tonight's the night to do a little digital hygiene and consider whether you want to keep following them. How much of this, Shira, is on Facebook and maybe the federal government to deal with? And how much of this is on us in terms of the way that we engage on Facebook and how savvy and or gullible we may be with what we allow to come across our screens?
I mean, both really are important. On the one hand, we should be teaching media literacy. One of the things we kind of hope happens with the publication of our book is that people spend more time thinking about their media diet, thinking about not just who they follow on Facebook, but what they share on Facebook, and hitting that, reshare button or that repost button. Maybe pause a minute and say, is this article too good to be true? Is this a valid source of information? At the same time, Facebook raises to the top of people's newsfeed the things that are most emotive. So you're more likely to see something that's probably going to get you angry or sad or happy at the very top of your newsfeed, and you're going to react to it. And so really, both things need to happen. That Disinformation Dozen that you mentioned, they've been around for years, some of them for over a decade. And so they've been a known problem for a long time that no one, including Facebook or the U.S. government, has contended with.
In our last few seconds, Cecilia, what's your sense of how Facebook is dealing with the kind of information that led to the insurrection on January 6th? The company does have departments within its structure to deal with this kind of info and says that it had been vigilant in removing that kind of content. What's your sense of how they're doing now, before we go?
They're playing catch up. The volume is so big. But we show in great detail in the book that information, all the warning signs were there many, many days before January 6th. And the same pattern emerged where the top leaders did not heed warnings from inside. So yes, they're catching up and they're trying, but they have such a long way to go.
Let me just add, just by way of a coda, if you're on Facebook and you're not sure exactly who to trust for information, look for the peacock. There are some of us who have built an entire career telling the truth to the American people, and we would not risk our careers to lie to you on Facebook. So you actually do know where to go for good information. We're happy to serve. Please, we're here to help. Shira Frankel, Cecilia Kong from the New York Times. The new book is called An Ugly Truth: Inside Facebook's Battle for Domination.